All right, everyone. It has officially happened. Penn State has officially ripped the band aid off, and they have indeed fired James Franklin. I'll be honest, I was not expecting us to be having this conversation at all this year. The fact that this storyline has developed as rapidly as it has is shocking to me. That's what I think is unique about the story overall is just how rapidly it all happened, just how rapidly Penn State's decline intensified. Because the Oregon game was one thing. Was it devastating to lose a game at home like that? Absolutely. Did it sting for Penn State fans? Yes. I mean, there were fired James Franklin chants going on at Beaver Stadium towards the end of that game when Penn State lost Drew Aller for the game-losing interception. Like, yes, there were very bitter feelings that took place there, but we had seen that kind of thing happen with Penn State. And you look at their schedule. I reacted. I said it doesn't get easier. They still have Indiana on the schedule. They still have Ohio State on the schedule. It doesn't get easier, but you've got UCLA and you've got Northwestern. So, in a perfect world, this really should ease up for Penn State, and it really should be a scenario where they can, the term we throw around in college football a lot, get right with two of the worst teams in the Big Ten. Well, that's when the unthinkable began to happen, and Penn State goes out to UCLA and loses to a Bruins team that was full of interim head coaches. A lot of guys who had never coached at that level before. Guys who were probably going to work at Albertsons after the game. I mean, newly appointed guys, and you had what was touted as one of the best coaching staffs in all of America in Penn State. You just brought in Jim Knowles from Ohio State. That's how elite Penn State staff was compared to UCLA's, who was just put together over the past week after Deshaun Foster was fired. And they go and catch Penn State with their pants down. And then yesterday, the absolute unthinkable happens. Losing to Northwestern. Not only losing to Northwestern, but losing to Northwestern at home at Beaver Stadium. So now you have two losses in one of the most electrifying and prolific environments in all of college football. Absolutely inexcusable. And, I mean, the firing, in essence, at surface level, makes sense because I don't know where you go from here. I don't know. The temperature and the room at Penn State is probably too tense to go on after losing to Northwestern, even given the Drew Aller injury. And sincerely, my prayers go out to Drew Aller. That's not how that was supposed to end at all. I was absolutely sick to my stomach yesterday when I saw that he had a season-ending injury because he's somebody who was supposed to take that jump this year, and he's somebody who had first or second round potential, and now he's out for the season. And I'm very sad to see that, and I'm praying for speedy recovery for Drew Aller. But the firing of James Franklin, moving on in some capacity, was inevitable. It was just how it was going to happen that I was curious about. What I was thinking was going to happen, and we still haven't gotten details on how this all went down yet, but what I was thinking was going to happen was at the end of the season, regardless of result, this felt very. I made this comparison with Dabo Swinney earlier this season, and I'm going to use it here. This felt very John Calipari-like, where both Kentucky and John Calipari knew that it was time to move on. The divorce is inevitable. How are we going to do it? How are we going to help each other get out of this? And so I was thinking that James Franklin was going to negotiate a little bit on his buyout, get him out of Penn State, maybe do broadcasting for a couple of years, and then get back into coaching. Or, if he wants, take on another job, just change of scenery. Sometimes that's all you need. But James Franklin in Penn State just wasn't working. He'd been there since 2014. This is the thing that people can't forget. James Franklin is the guy that brought Penn State back from the doldrums after the whole Sandusky scandal. He was the guy that put them back on the map. I mean, we all remember that Ohio State game in 2016 with the blocked field goal, return for the touchdown. Like that was the James Franklin putting Penn State on the map game. And so he did a lot of great things for this university and for this program. But as time went on and this situation progressed, it just kept on getting more stale. And the staleness led to toxicity and uncomfortable temperature in the room, which is why Penn State made the decision that they did. I saw earlier today that if Penn State were to fire James Franklin during the season, the buyout would be around $56 million. And so what I'm waiting to find out on, and I will update as this goes on, what I'm waiting to find out about is if that's what Penn State actually paid or if negotiations took place and both parties agreed on a number that works for both of them to just move on, go your separate ways. Maybe that's indeed what happened. As of right now, Penn State's associate head coach and cornerbacks head coach, Terry Smith, who was actually a letterman at Penn State, is taking over as the interim head coach for the Nittany Lions. And so life goes on. There's still football to be played in State College, still football to be played for Penn State. And so you get a firing like this during the season, and a shocking firing at that. That's why I'm live talking about it right now. Even amidst all of that, life goes on, and you've got to carry on. You've got to continue to play football. But what's stood out about James Franklin and his tenure at Penn State was the lack of execution in big moments. That's what led to where we are right now. I mean, he was infamously 4-21 in games against top 10 opponents, and that's absolutely inexcusable. Absolutely inexcusable. And it wasn't just bad luck. When you lose 21 games against top 10 opponents, that's not just bad luck. That's a reflection on you and your program. And there were two common threads that I saw at Penn State in these games. Number one, lack of preparation. I saw that when they play Ohio State. I saw that when they play Michigan a lot. And I saw it with Oregon this year. Number two, just overthinking the play calling. That happened a lot. Penn State overthinking play calling. Having guys that have just insubordinate amount of talent. It's an extreme amount of talent on the field. You saw it last year with Tyler Warren, generational player. That duo, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton. This is a team that had Saquon Barkley, Micah Parsons, Abdul Carter. There's been some absolute dogs that have gone through Penn State since James Franklin were there. But I never felt like those guys, respectively, were put in the right positions to be clutch and execute and win these big games under James Franklin's tenure. And that's what ultimately led to this. Because Penn State fans had enough. I had enough watching it. I was never big on the Penn State hype going into the season. I was always more of an Ohio State or Oregon guy. But this, even for somebody like me, losing to UCLA and Northwestern, I did not foresee that happening. Okay, TC just commented here. Thank you for the support. I really appreciate it. Who are the candidates to take over for Penn State when it comes to the head coach position? Let me look that up right now, actually, because I'm genuinely curious myself. Penn State candidates. Off the top of my head, I've got 6 right here. According to the Daily Collegian, let's see what they're saying. Kurt Cignetti? Absolutely fucking not. That guy has a perfect situation where he is right now, is building Indiana into a powerhouse. It's kind of the same vision that Lane Kiffin has with Ole Miss. That's not going to happen. Matt Rule? I wouldn't love that. Again, preparation, bad mistakes. That's been an issue with Nebraska. So I wouldn't want to be Penn State bringing more of that into the building, if I'm being honest. Terry Smith, who is the interim head coach, if he galvanizes this team the right way, he could very well be Penn State's next head coach. Kalen DeBoer, absolutely not. Don't have to discuss that. And Manny Diaz, don't love that. Nick Saban, these people are on crack. Okay. Let's see what ESPN has to say, because none of those are happening. Nick Saban's not happening. Kalen DeBoer is building a monster in Alabama right now. That's not going to happen either. Let's look at some candidates here. Iowa State coach Matt Campbell. I think that could happen. Matt Campbell sticks out to me. That could very well happen, because that's another situation right now with him in Iowa State where I feel like it's starting to become over the hill. And I've always been big on Iowa State and Matt Campbell there. He's been great for the program. But recently they lost to Colorado yesterday, lost to Cincinnati the week before. The Matt Campbell Iowa State thing could be coming to an end. TC asks John Gruden. Maybe. I think that John Gruden might make that splash next year, or coming into the season. I think that's why he brought the whole podcast thing back. No, that's something that could very well happen. There's the thing about this offseason is, compared to what we've seen in the past, there is going to be an absolute shit ton of high-profile open head coaching positions, more than I've seen in my lifetime. I'm 25 years old, to give context. It's going to be more than I've seen in my lifetime when it comes to these head coaching positions being available. You obviously have Penn State now. UCLA is going to make their decision. I think you're going to have Florida. You're going to have Arkansas. I don't know if the whole Bobby Petrino thing can be there. That's interesting, but I don't know what that's going to be. Let me just think if I'm missing anybody. I think that Venables is safe in Oklahoma at this point. And so, yeah, those are the few that come to mind right now. Comment if I'm missing anything. I may be drawing a blank. Do Coach Manny Diaz, maybe. I know that there's a connection with him in Penn State. And I think that he'd bring a great energy there. But ultimately, I don't see that happening. Dan Mullen, UNLV. Honestly, that's my favorite. That's my favorite to take this job right here, is Dan Mullen. Either Dan Mullen or Matt Campbell. Those are the two that stick out to me. You likely won't see a positions coach who's an interim coach take that position, because there's not many situations where that works out, because it's so weird. Like, you fire James Franklin, you bring in an interim head coach, and what's going to happen here, it's inevitable. What's going to end up happening is these guys are going to rally behind Terry Smith. He's going to bring a new energy out of this team. Penn State will probably play some of their best football we've seen this year, just because there's a shift in energy, and it's more about playing football and the fundamentals of that than it is, having all of this drama around you. Because when you have a situation like this James Franklin situation in Penn State, it lingers. It lingers in the locker room. It's an elephant in the room. It has a weight on the energy within the program. And so your mind isn't on playing football. Your mind is on escaping these games, without ramifications happening for your coach. But now that the hammer's been dropped by the Penn State athletic department, now these players can fully focus on football again. Kind of like what you saw with UCLA, who beat Penn State a few weeks ago. You have the whole Deshaun Foster thing looming. And then he gets fired. You got Jerry Neuheisel in there, and all of a sudden you're playing out of your mind. Because if you could simplify the game down to just playing football, X's and O's, going out there, doing what you were born to do, and having fun doing it, like that's when you play your best football. And you do that when you're distraction-free. That's why Saban always preached being distraction-free at Alabama, and it worked, because those guys were prepared, they're ready to go, they play with their best energy. Well, being distraction-free can simply be removing a source of drama from the equation. And this was a source of drama when when you're discussing buyouts. And that's the thing is this morning, there are talks already happening within the athletic department of, what's this going to look like? What's this move going to look like? So it's going to happen. You're losing your coach at the end of the year. It's just an uncomfortable situation. It's an uncomfortable dynamic. But once you make that decision, you get him out of the building, then it's onward and upward. So I think you're going to see some of Penn State's best football come, but don't get it misconstrued. Don't get it twisted. I think they still go out and get a Matt Campbell, or they go out and get a Dan Mullen. I think because not Dan Campbell. I almost mixed the names. That's nuts. Matt Campbell has worked wonders at Iowa State. I think his time there is coming to an end, but he's done a fucking great job there, making that program relevant. I love to see it. I love the Iowa State brand and the way he's amplified it. But it may be time for them to go their separate ways. And then Dan Mullen, we know that the whole Florida thing happened. Florida should have never fired him. He did a great job at Florida. Florida almost beat us. Florida almost beat Alabama in the SEC championship a few months prior. That was a mistake. That was like Auburn firing Gus Malzahn. Maybe that's another guy that Penn State goes after. Florida State's OC, Gus Malzahn. Maybe. I think that would be a good fit as well. But Dan Mullen's a great head coach, and that's why he went back into broadcasting to build his brand up, get some credibility back, get athletic directors looking at him in a positive light, and then get that job, get that leap pad job, that springboard job, which is UNLV, to get an opportunity like this. And your guys like Dan Mullen, your guys like John Gruden, who are putting a comeback together right now. There's no better time. You got Penn State, you got Arkansas, you got the Florida job that's going to be open. This is a great point in time for those guys to capitalize. And you saw Dan Mullen transform Mississippi State, who was irrelevant for a while, into being the first ever number 1 ranked team in the college football playoff poll. Nuts. The Dak Prescott year. That was a great run they ran on before us Alabama Crimson Tide ended it in T-Town. And then we did with Florida. I mean, Florida, Florida was going through the glory days when I was growing up, Tim Tebow and all that. And then they fell off the map. Dan Mullen brought them back. Kyle Trask, Kyle Pitts, Kadarius Toney. It's a hell of a team. I think he can do the same at Penn State. And I think he can turn their recruiting around because Penn State's recruiting has been mid. I think that Dan Mullen can make it a lot better. TC comments and says, Franklin was never a big enough name in football for Penn State to offer Franklin such a big buyout. That's what was negotiated. They agreed to that. They should have kept that in mind. They're negotiating. I don't think that Penn State, like from a business standpoint, when they organized Franklin's last extension, I don't think that Penn State ever looked 3 years down the road and said, yeah, let's consider the fact that we may fire him in 2025. I don't think that was ever a thought in their mind. Because for the past couple of years, the future has looked so bright for Penn State, and the conversation was always, when are they going to take their next step? And then 2023 happens. I thought they had a great team who could have gone to the playoff. They missed. 2024, last year, should have beaten Notre Dame, went to the Natty, lost that game. That was devastating. And then, obviously, the mess this year, where a lot of people had them predicted to go to the Natty. Disaster. I don't think that anybody in Penn State's athletic department anticipated this situation happening here. So that's why the buyout was so large, because I don't think they ever thought they'd get into this situation. But maybe something for other athletic departments to take note of, because you never know when things can go downhill pretty fast. I mean, this is a pretty extreme situation just because of how quickly it intensified, but it illustrates the programs out there. It can happen. But Penn State fans, I feel bad. I mean, y'all deserve better. You bring that juice, you bring the energy to Beaver Stadium, those whiteouts, and it's fucking incredible. And it's such a letdown every time when Penn State loses to an AP top 10 team there. And y'all deserve better than that. You deserve to be shouting from the mountaintops, we're the best, with that energy that you bring, because it's fantastic. And I can't tell you how many Penn State teams we've seen that have all the capability in the world to make a national championship run. I mean, you look at that Saquon team. Was that 2017? You look at 2019. You look at 2023, 2024. Teams that could have played for national championship. Like, I get that Ohio State and Michigan are great programs. They shouldn't be outpacing you every year. And after a while, it was a reflection on coaching when it comes to preparation, when it comes to execution, when it comes to play calling. There's a lot of overthinking going on, not getting the ball to your best player, not amplifying your best players. That's why Penn State lost a lot of these games, and then just straight up being outcoached by guys like Jim Harbaugh, by guys like Urban Meyer. It just happened over and over and over again. And Penn State just finally had enough this year. Keep y'all updated on the whole buyout situation. And if any more potential candidates are unveiled, I'll keep y'all posted on that. But for now, thank you all for watching. This was some huge breaking news on a Sunday here. And now it's back to our rightful place, watching NFL football on the couch. Have a great day.